Right, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
I've been doing a Factories Act over last 2 days. The third thing that is there in the Factories Act, which we have got to deal with, is the point of welfare. Right? Welfare, as we all know, are said to be of two types. One we call as statutory welfare, that is provided in the law. And the second one is referred to as voluntary welfare. Although what we find that literature basically tells that welfare basically pertains to whatever has been done by the organizations for the benefit of the employee, which is not provided in law. But in Indian condition, we have both statutory as well as voluntary welfare. Here we will today look at what are different provisions that is there as far as the voluntary welfare, statutory welfare is concerned. And it begins with section 42. Now, section 42 talks about washing facilities, which was not allowed prior to the passing of the Factories Act. This washing is the washing of clothes, washing and drying of clothes, number one. Number two, it also talks about the bathing facilities wherever necessary in the factory premises, where humidity of the air increases beyond certain levels. They have got to provide bathing facilities within the organization, right? So what we find is that it was not there. In fact, if you talk about the earlier times, it was a punishable offense if somebody was found washing or drying clothes within the factory premises. So this facility has been provided. Not only this, they also talk about, in the subsequent section, that is section 43, facilities for storing and drying of clothes within the factory premises if the clothes gets dirty. It's not that you can bring clothes from home. It is the cloth that you are wearing for the organization. That cloth can be washed and dried, and the bathing should also be allowed within the factory premises. Section 44 talks about sitting facilities. Now here, wherever the production process by nature is such that a person can operate the machine and sit and watch, they should be allowed sitting facilities, or wherever the production process is such that they can sit and work, they should be allowed to sitting facilities within the factory premises. Section 45 talks about provision of first aid appliances within the factory. Now these first aid boxes should be marked clearly as first aid boxes, and it should contain all equipment that is required. So it will have say things like Dettol. It must have scissor. It must have band-aids. It must have those rolls of cotton. It must have the cotton strips, which is to tie if there is a small bruises or anything of the similar kind in the first aid boxes. It also talks about some tincture that has to be there, which is to be applied for bandage purpose. Section 46 talks about provision of canteen facilities within the factory premises. Now these canteen facilities may not be subsidized canteens. It may be the canteen that is there where people can go and eat. But normally what we find that these canteens are not selling things at the market rate. It is always lower than the market rate. And it says that if 150 or more workers are employed in any factory, they must have canteen facilities within the factory premises. That is there. Now these canteens should be statutorily run by the workers themselves. The organizations will provide a place for these canteens. They will provide all the furnitures and utensils. They will also provide power to these canteens, and these canteens will be run within the factory premises. Section 47 talks about shelters, restrooms, and lunch rooms. This is especially meant for businesses like construction workers, or wherever the workers have got to remain in under open sky and work. It says that they must provide for shelters for them. They must provide for restrooms during the recess period, and a lunch room where these people can go and eat their lunch. That has to be there. I said it is mainly for construction workers, or it is also there for the mines or plantation workers. Section 48 talks about crash. Now this crash facility is to be maintained by all factories which employs 30 or more women workers. Now it says that these crash should be furnished by the organizations. They must have trained ayahs to look after the children. All beds has to be there within that factory crash, and they must also have equipments for playing of children. But crash facility is meant for children up to the age of 6 years only. It is not for higher age groups. We also find that these no food stuffs will be provided in the crash. The food and milk has to be provided to the children by their parents. It further says that such crash must be within 1 kilometer vicinity of the factories, so that lactic mothers can feed their children during 1.5 years, that is provided in the Maternity Act that is there. So these crash facilities has to be provided as per the Factories Act. We also find that under Section 49, welfare officers in every factory wherein 500 or more workers are ordinarily employed, the occupier shall employ in factory such number of welfare officers as may be prescribed. And their duties and qualifications and conditions of service are to be prescribed. Now, if you recall in the beginning when we started off this course, we said that the first thing that happened was the appointment of welfare officers, which was there as far as these, factories were concerned. Initially, only welfare officers were appointed, and that is said to be the beginning of HR in the Indian context. We also find that working hours for adults are also prescribed under Section 51. Weekly hours are being prescribed, and it says that no adult worker is to be required or allowed to work for more than 48 hours in a week, right? Or that normally it is 40 hours a week, but the law says it should not be more than 40 hours. But before I go to the working hours, I'll try and mention three more acts which provides for the welfare amenities that is to be provided to the workers within the factory. First is the Mines Act. Mines Act provides that every pit head must have washing facilities at the outside the pit heads, and that can be utilized by the workers, because working in the mines, of course, makes their clothes dirty, which has to be washed and maintained. The Mines Act also provides for lunch rooms outside the pit heads. It also provides for clothing that has to be provided to the workers. It also provides for schools for the children of the employees. It also provides for crash facilities, outside the pit heads. That is there. These provisions are also present in the Plantation Act with similar conditions. In addition to these, like they also provide for umbrella to be provided to plantation workers. Plantation workers must also be provided with blankets for the winter season. They must be provided with raincoats during the winter season. They must also be provided with boots which are to be utilized in the plantation estates, because normally staying in those areas, we find that snakes are very, very common, and there is a water logging everywhere. So they must be provided with those boots which covers beyond the knees of the workers. It also provides for umbrella, as we know, schools. It also provides for dispensaries wherever necessary, and schools as it is provided in the Factories Act as well. We also find that these provisions exist for the Motor Transport Act. Now, Motor Transport Act talks about provision of tightly fitted clothes to the drivers and conductors. It also provides for provision of first aid facilities that has to be there in every unit of transport. It also provides for restrooms on the depots which are there. It provides for lunch rooms and canteens at the depots which is there, right? And dispensaries at the depots which is provided in the this particular act. Now, going to working hours, we said that working hours should not exceed 48 hours a day. Now, this used to be very, very long initially, but that was restricted because a normal human being cannot work for more than 48 hours as per this Factories Act. And I said that it is 40 hours in general, including the lunch hours, excluding the lunch hours which are there. It further says that on any given day, a worker should not be asked to work for more than 9.5 hours. Right? That is including the rest interval of 1 hour. And it further says that nobody should be asked to work for more than 5.5 hours in continuation without rest that is being provided. Section 52 talks about number of adult worker is to, no adult worker is to work on the first day of the week unless he has or will have a holiday for a whole day on one of the 3 days immediately before or after the days, and manager has before that day or substituted day, whichever is earlier. Now these are normally agreed to between the unions and the management, that which day will be holiday. Normally we say first day because first day of the week happens to be Sunday, and normal holidays are on Sundays. But at some places, these holidays are also on there. Instead of Sunday, they have it on Tuesday or they have it on Friday, whichever area we go to, depending on the practice in that particular area. We also find that Section 53 talks about compensatory holidays. In the event of exemption from the provisions of Section 52, a worker deprived of weekly holiday is to be allowed compensatory holiday. They will get a receipt saying that how many days, or a register has to be maintained for each worker as to how many holidays they work, and in lieu of that, they would be allowed compensatory holiday of equal number within that month or within 2 months immediately following that month, right? It's not that you carry on for a year. Section 54, as we said, talks about daily working hours. Now, daily working hours is 9.5 hours, and no 9 hours there. And it is also talking about not continuously more than 5 hours before interval that is there, and that rest interval should be of minimum half an hour. Normally, it is of 1 hour. Section 56 talks about spread over, that is not more than 10.5 hours, not to exceed 12 hours, that is there. A spread over of work that can be there. In terms of night shifts, holiday for a whole day means 24 hours following end of shift. So if somebody has worked in the night shift of the 14th and 15th of March, that is in the morning, they started in the night, 10 o'clock, and finished it in the morning on 15th, then they will not be asked to join work or any shift on the 15th daytime, right? And if there is a shift, that has to be the next night, in the night only they will work. Or if there is a shift change that they have got to work in day, then that gap has to be of minimum 24 hours. They will only be asked to work from the morning of 16th. I think I should repeat this point. I said 2 things are there. Number 1, shift working is that if night shifts are there, then the person it should be agreed upon with the employer and employee. Number 2, they will only be working in the night shifts. They cannot be shifted to day shift. If they are shifted to day shift, then the gap between the 2 shifts, the last time they worked and they start the working, that must have a gap of 24 hours, which has to be there. Section 59 talks about extra wage for overtime. When a worker works in a factory for more than 9 hours in any day or more than 48 hours in a week, he is to be paid overtime at twice his ordinary rate, right? Now, 7th Pay Commission, we said, has abolished the overtime, but that is only for the government office workers, not for the workers in the factories. Earlier in the government offices, they were paid overtime at 1.5 times the ordinary rate. But in the factories, it is twice the normal rate of payment that is being made to the workers. Now, ordinary rate means basic and dearness allowance, and cash equivalent of food, etc. That is the concession, but not bonus and OT. That is there. A time rate, not piece rate, should be applied here, and cash equivalent is for total entitlement, not for a part of it. And the government, has a right to make rules regarding the payment of overtime, which they had been doing. Under Section 60, there is a restriction on double employment. But what is double employment? Can anybody tell me? Anybody who can tell me what is double employment? Hello?
So you are getting, I think you are getting paid according to the shift you are doing. Suppose you are doing double shift, so you will get double payment.
No. No, I'm not saying double shift, it is double employment.
So employment at two different places of the
yes,
same
sir.
person?
Yeah. It is a person is working at two different places. They finish working at one place and start working at another place. That is prohibited as per law. Even some people who are working a full day 9 hours at one place and thereafter they open a shop or something of that kind, even that is prohibited. You cannot do that as per the Factories Act of 1948. That will amount to double employment, and double employment is not permitted. Although we find that people do it without notice or without knowledge, but if they are caught, they are going to lose their jobs. That is the minimum punishment they get. Section 61 is the notice of period of work or adults that has to be there. So such notices has to be there, and person should be informed as to how many hours they are going to work, etc. on the letter of appointment itself. And also it should be pasted on the notice board, the organization's main notice board, and on the notice boards of the unions to which an employee is a member. Section 62 talks about maintenance of register of adult workers, which is referred to as roll list. Roll lists are of two different types. One is called the muster roll, that is for the temporary employees, but for the regular employee, there has to be a register which should maintain everything. Section 64 talks about power to make rules, and 65 power to make exemption rules for the employee is also provided as per the Factories Act of 1948. Section 66 further restrictions on employment of women is there. That is no exemption from Section 54, i.e. provision of daily hours. Now, it further says that the working hours for a female are between 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. It has to be there, and in no case between 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. That is there. But if the nature of employment is such that they only work in the night, then this restriction does not apply. So a women worker should not be asked to work after 10 p.m. and until 5 a.m. in the morning. Their working hours should normally be 6 a.m. in the morning to 7 p.m. in the evening. That is there. Beyond that, they should not be asked to stay in the factories. Shift change only after a weekly holiday, that is provided. And exception to be noted wherever it comes up, and the rules has to be made regarding these conditions for 3 years only, after which it must be revised. This act also provides for employment of young persons. Under 67, it is prohibited that a young person should be employed until they are being trained, and therefore they say that no child who has not completed his 14 years is to be required or allowed to work in any factory. So there is complete restriction of working until the 14 years of age. After that, they are allowed to work for under the trained instructor. Child means a person who has not completed his 15th year of age. That is there. We find that section 68 non-adult workers to carry tokens. Now a child who has completed his 14 years or an adolescent is not to be required to allow to work in a factory unless certificate of fitness is there with them and they are carrying a token giving a reference to the certificate is carried by him while at workplace. 69.1 talks about fitness certificate, that is certifying surgeons on application by young person of his parents accompanied by a document by manager or on application by manager is to examine that ascertain his fitness and age as well. Now this certifying surgeon, if satisfied that examination may grant or renew certificate of fitness, they can do so. To work in a factory as a child, to work in a factory as an adult, certificate is to be valid only for 12 months, after which it must be revised or recertified. This certificate can even be revoked at any time within 1 year period, and any refusal to grant certificate, he is to give reasons. He cannot just deny the certificate, and if certificate is given under certain conditions, the conditions are to be specified, and that fees for issue of this certificate will be payable. We also find that adolescent granted certificate of fitness and carrying token will be deemed to be adult, but unless he has attained 17 years, he is not to be required to work except between 6 a.m. to 5 a.m. So these people are not allowed to work beyond 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. That is there. We also have got working hours for children, not more than 4.5 hours in a day, not during the night, and period of work to be limited to 2 shifts, no overlap or a spread over will be there. Not to work in a factory on a day if he has worked in another factory, that is double employment of course is prohibited, and female child only between 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. They are allowed. Now the notice of period of work for children is also to be given. A separate register has to be maintained for these workers, and power is required. Power to require medical examination is always there with the factories, and the appropriate government has power to make rules regarding the factories which are there. We also find that annual leave is there. We have seen the annual leaves which an employee is being granted under the 7th Pay Commission or 6th Pay Commission. We said that 6th Pay Commission says a government employee should be allowed 8 casual leaves and 10 earned leave which is there. Plus, if detained, they will be allowed a detention leave. For the workers, it is said that they will get 1 month of annual leave in the factories which they are working in, and that is not encashable, that they have got to accumulate. So every worker who has worked for 240 days or more in a calendar year will be allowed in subsequent calendar year leave with wages calculated at the end. Now if adult, 1 day for every 20 days of work is to be calculated, and if a child, 1 day for every 15 days of work is there. Now explanation layoff by agreement, contract or permissible by standing orders, maternity leave prior to earned leave are to be counted for calculation. Just 1 minute, please. Somebody. Right. What we, what we find that, you know, leave admissible is to be exclusive of all holidays that is there. And if service does not commence on first day of January, the worker is to be entitled to leave with wages, provided he has worked for 2/3 of the number of days in a remainder of the year. And if worker is discharged or dismissed, or he quits or superannuates or dies in harness, he is to be entitled for a leave with wages and payment is to be made. We know that Seventh Pay Commission says, Sixth Pay Commission says that, Sixth and Seventh Pay Commission says that 300 days of earned leave or full pay leave can be accumulated, which will be encashable. That is the provision also for the workers, but number of days are not being specified. If worker is, so therefore we assume 300 days for them as well. If the worker is discharged or dismissed or quits before the expiry of second working day, and if worker superannuates or dies before the expiry of 2 months, the fraction of leave of half a day or more to be treated as full day leave, which is there. Now, leave not taken is to be added to the leave to be allowed, and application for leave has to be there 15 days in advance. Now, this is compulsory that if you are taking a leave other than casual leave, such leave must be applied for 15 days, 2 weeks in advance. Otherwise, it will be treated as absence. Now, leave required to cover illness to be granted. Now, if somebody falls ill as per the Act, we find that such person can abstain from work. That is temporary disablement, as we call them. We will look at the details when we do Social Security in the subsequent topic. We also find that continuity of work and displaying the schemes has to be there, and leave cannot be refused by the organization if it is applied in time, and if employment is terminated, the payment has to be made as far as these conditions are concerned. Daily average wage of total full-time earning for days actually worked during the month preceding leave excludes bonus and overtime, but includes DA and cash equivalent of food concessions if not worked during the month. That is also there as far as these workers are concerned. We find that payment in advance in certain cases can be given. A worker, that is the adult worker, who has been allowed leave for not less than 4 days and child for not less than 5 days is to be paid in advance for the leave period. And Section 82, mode of recovery of unpaid wage, is also being provided within the Factories Act under the provisions of the Payment of Wages Act 1936. And Section 83 talks about power to make rules, and 84 power of exemption from the Factories Act, which is there. There are special provisions which can be provided by the state government as far as this particular act is concerned. I'll stop here for today. We will have our classes tomorrow, I suppose. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Is the class over now?